This week, our feature interview is with Atif Ghari from the Hershovet Group. He's the CTO and going to come on and talk about some interesting security topics. You'll just have to wait and find out what we're going to talk about. In the enterprise security news, we're going to talk about thwarting insider threats with machine learning, buying versus building, network performance as it relates to security. AlienVault makes a move. Are you seeing this? Uncovering encrypted channels in your network. Bitdefender reveals some new technologies for hypervisors. NopSec has an announcement. We'll talk a little bit about SIM and tools that made a dent in the WannaCry ransomware. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Practice field, I had to do that to the door, and then once the wind caught it, I flew outside the door.
That's I call that a programmer's workout.
Yes, that is a programmer's workout.
I was at RSA. I got out. I have seen things. I've seen horrible things.
Pony Express. Check out their line of penetration testing devices, including the Pwn Pad, Pwn Phone, and Pwn Pro. For enterprises, there's Pwn Pulse, providing continuous visibility into wired, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth spectrums across all physical locations, including remote sites and branch offices. For all those hard-to-reach places, there's Pony Express. Visit them on the web at ponyexpress.com. In order to deliver the maximum degree of privacy, personal data must be protected without action from an individual. In fact, this requirement is defined in the General Data Protection Regulation, also known as GDPR. What if you could reliably and efficiently build privacy into your information security programs by default? StealthBits Technologies provides solutions that allow data to be collected and used in a manner that achieves GDPR compliance. Privacy by design and by default is not just a GDPR requirement, it's the foundation of StealthBits Technologies. Visit stealthbits.com to learn more today. Gain control of cyber risk with Tenable.io, the first vulnerability management platform built for today's elastic assets like cloud, containers, and web apps. Discover a fresh, asset-based approach that prioritizes vulnerabilities while seamlessly integrating into your environment. And improve ROI with the first elastic licensing approach based on assets, not IP addresses. Tenable.io delivers the data and context you need to secure your elastic attack surface. Start your free Tenable.io trial today by visiting Tenable.io. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. It is episode 46, and today is Thursday, May 25th. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, on the lines via Skype with some sound proofing materials. Padding? I forget exactly what
a little bit.
What is it?
Yeah.
It's soundproofing. Is that the right term for it? Yes.
Yeah, it's just a little bit. I've got a whole big drop cloth on the other side of the room. We're starting to put this up. We got a whole big stack more of it. I came in and some people put it up, and I had to explain that this isn't going to do much, but at least it looks better than a plain white room, so it doesn't look like I'm in a padded. Well, I guess it is a padded cell.
And now it truly is a padded cell, John.
Yeah, it is.
Welcome to the show. Atif Ghari is here with us. Atif, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
So, Atif, we're going to do the news first. I know we didn't really prep you for that, but if you at any time want to interject into our conversation, we're just going to talk about some of the news stories that we identified this week and talk about them as it relates to enterprise security. You're going to do great. we're going to look forward to your feedback as well. So first, a couple of quick announcements. I almost forgot the announcements. My teleprompter is catching up with itself. I apologize for that. So, Wild West Hackin' Fest. John, any updates for Wild West Hackin' Fest, October 27th and 28th? It's in, you're hosting this event.
Yeah. So right now we've got all of our speakers all lined up, which our speaker lineup is ridiculously sick. So check that out. It's going to be really, really cool. We are actually selling tickets at a much higher clip. We were selling like 1 or 2 tickets a day, which is crazy this far out. But now we've just jumped up to 4 or 5 a day. So tickets are going fast. We're going to cap it, I think, at about 500. And no, we got. It looks like we might get Grim as a vendor. They're going to come out. And they're going to bring a Ford on a board. Or
Nice.
3PO, and it's going to have like all this automotive hacking and embedded device hacking. We're trying to make it the most hands-on security conference you could possibly attend. So check it out.
That's awesome. WildWestHackandFest.com. Also, the Sans Pen Test Hackfest is are we still good? We're still good. Tomorrow is the deadline for call for papers. So if you haven't submitted by now, by the time you listen to this, it might be too late. I don't know if the show gets posted today or tomorrow morning. You've got till 5 p.m. tomorrow, essentially, to send an email to pentestcfp@sans.org by 5 p.m. tomorrow. The subject line, Sans Pentest Hackfest Summit CFP 2017. They're looking for some awesome talks, and the conference will be held November 13th and 14th in Bethesda, Maryland. More on that conference as we move forward. First in the news this week is thwarting insider threats with machine learning. I have to say, at a high level, they actually got this article right. They show examples of machine learning to detect insider threats. It's kind of like an infographic with some text around it, which, as much as I hate infographics, they actually used it pretty well. Like, I liked the text explanation in between some of the graphics. So I did like it. The thing that gets me, though, is the first step in this approach is to baseline what's happening on your network. And I get very concerned about that and the difficulty level that it is to achieve a baseline, because did your admin make an upgrade or a change the behavior of an application or system, or did the user do something different? I think it's really hard to tell the difference between the two.
I think, you know what's tough about this is we still have a lot of vendors, and the idea of detecting an insider threat, I think we'd all agree, is incredibly important. But people need to understand that there's very little difference whenever it comes to a detection capability from detecting an insider with an account that is doing bad things and a bad guy that has taken over an account and is using it like a puppet. So we've been saying it on Security Weekly for a long time that basically if you do not have the ability to detect insiders in your organization, then you really don't have a security program, period. The baselining behavior, you're absolutely right, Paul. Trying to baseline this stuff is incredibly difficult. But they have really cool graphics that have all these little purple and orange men that make it look easy.
Yeah, if I could jump in.
Go ahead. I was just going to, go ahead.
Yeah, so with our clients, I mean, we use UBA solutions, which are user behavior anomaly detection type of solutions, and baselining is the key part. So we hit where Herjavec Group hits where operations goes. So yeah, how do you actually use it? And with baselining typically takes 60 days, 90 days, and then also the right logs. Are you actually getting the correct logs into your environment? So it's, yeah.
I could see why Paul invited you on the show and why it's good that we have you here. Because one of my huge pet peeves is there's so much right now around log everything, and getting the right logs, getting the right information, and alerting on the right things is absolutely key.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got another story that touches on that as well. So this next article I really liked. It came from Threat Quotient, and it was like a user, a testimonial from someone who works at Threat Quotient today but worked in an organization and had to make a decision to basically, they were forced into build what's currently known as a threat intelligence platform to manage indicators, adversary profiles, spearfish trends, and team commentary and annotations. And the question is, several years ago, the question to buy or build was definitely build, because nothing was available on the market. Now, there are more tools available on the market, and I think that's obviously where Threat Quotient's trying to position themselves. I'm not sure how well, but I think it's kind of interesting when I talk to organizations about this type of thing, or especially with vulnerability management. I don't find too many things on the market today that you can just go drop in, and even with customization that lets you effectively manage your threat intelligence platform or your vulnerability management platform. John, Tiff, do you have comments, suggestions on that?
I'll let Tiff go first on this one, but I'll jump in too.
Yeah, so what we see is that most threat intelligence programs that are leveraging a tip are 6 months to a year behind. Unless you're a 3-letter agency or a really sophisticated, mature security program, getting your arms around your actual data in your environment and applying the threat intelligence, right? The vendors do a great job of telling you, hey, we'll get my feed and you're good. And that was several years ago where CIOs thought they bought a feed and they were all of a sudden they're protected. And then later they found out that you actually have to apply that data. And are you looking at the right adversaries that are targeting your line of business or even your industry? And so that's why I would say 6 months to a year behind, because you could have a tip, you could have the logs coming in, you could have the orchestration happening, but how do you apply it? What are the right rule sets to use, right? That's like the operational specifics that are very challenging.
And
go ahead, John.
And with, we've talked about this on Security Weekly, on Enterprise Security Weekly. I think that we're looking at it in completely the wrong way. Right now, everybody's trying to figure out who are the threat actors that are coming after them. What are their techniques? It doesn't matter. Who cares? We're trying to say, what is it? Is it APT-12? Is it Sad Panda? Is it Vicious Panda? Is it Righteous Metal Fest Panda with a huge pipe line of beer going into a tent? It doesn't matter. And the reason why is the number of threat actors is extremely varied. I think that we need to be focusing on detection of the threat techniques. And a lot of organizations, they don't do a very good job at detecting much anything at all. And yet they're spending all of this time trying to figure out what is a specific APT group in Shanghai doing, and it's a total waste of time. And something that you can focus on is go to the MITRE.org attack matrix. If you just do a Google search for attack.mitre.org, they have the technique matrix. Well, the number of attackers is almost infinite and completely elastic and almost infinitely scalable. The actual techniques for exploitation, post-exploitation, lateral movement are not. So what you should be doing is you should be looking at something like the attack matrix and saying, how many of these different attack and exfiltration, collection, and lateral movement techniques can we actually detect? Let's stop focusing so much on what the different threat actors are doing and instead start focusing on the activities the threat actors are taking. And I think that would be a much better approach. And I think, Paul, we've talked about it. There are some products that are starting to do this type of integration, saying, we're going to take these techniques matrix and we're going to apply it into your organization and make sure that we have these detection points. Mm-hmm. And they're putting a lot less focus now on detecting individual threat actors and instead looking at the techniques which can be reused across multiple different threat actors.
Absolutely. I found this article on network performance. It's interesting. There's a vendor called GSX. They claim they're the only solution that provides robot users to test network performance in real time and from multiple locations. When network issues are detected, administrators are notified before the issue reaches the users. And I thought it was interesting for two reasons. One, I think it relates to security in a couple of ways. Like security, performance, those small little things that you do can impact performance. And those small little things that you do could also impact security. I know from performance testing and tuning our websites, which I underwent a small project to get it ready to pass off to a consultant to take it to all kinds of new levels, that small little changes definitely impact both of those things, especially when configuring Nginx, as if you tried to go to our website last night. It wasn't available. But so I thought that was kind of an interesting parallel. Also, I think it'll be interesting when there are vendors that I think try and do this today, are those robot users to test your network security in real time. And I think that's kind of an interesting front. And I think we might see more of that. And again, I want to make the important distinction that is more like artificial intelligence than machine learning, which vendors seem to get those two terms confused and mashed together.
I like their approach, though. This is kind of cool. The GSX idea of having quote-unquote robot users that can check network performance from multiple places. It's almost like they completely forgot that network administrators can hit switches and run traceroute and pings and do network performance. SolarWinds has been doing network performance analytics across multiple different switch platforms and network segments for a long, long, long time. But this is somewhat interesting, having multiple virtual users that you can check connectivity. Because honestly, do we really see network, like you're talking about Nginx upgrades? It's not really a network issue per se. I mean, most of the problems we see in organizations today are usually performance issues on individual workstations. Networks are getting fairly robust in most organizations. I could be wrong, but I don't know. Is this that big of an issue anymore?
A lot of it is the application side of it. And you're right, John, the network, we've got plenty of bandwidth here. Most users have plenty of bandwidth. Computers are pretty fast. It's usually the application configuration.
The application.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like I noticed swapping out my PHP back end, it was like huge performance increases that it essentially stemming from people have more bandwidth and faster computers can hit our website more efficiently. So those application improvements, I can throw all the RAM and CPU I want at my virtual servers, but those application tuning, and that's often where you make a configuration mistake and all of a sudden your website is really slow and it's because of configuration. Tiff?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, more of the same for me here, guys, that the application performance is key there. Network it's expected to be fast, right? It's expected to be consistent and resilient, self-healing. There's all sorts of methods to do similar types of bot. I would call them robots or bots to measure that activity. So interesting.
More of just an announcement. AlienVault has added Ingram Micro to its security portfolio. We've obviously talked about AlienVault in the past. They're making the move into the channel, which is an interesting adventure. If you're a vendor, it may also, I think, kind of speak to their play into the mid-market in security as opposed to the enterprise. As I find, I think more of the mid-market buys from an integrator like Ingram Micro. And gets a suite of tools that pretend to work together and most oftentimes don't really. But, their USM is definitely, I mean, they always seem to have, AlienVault seems to always have like something in the mix to make enterprises and even in the mid-market like consider it, right? I don't think they win a lot, all those deals certainly, but I've heard it come up in a lot more conversations as being a more cost-effective alternative to some of the other platforms out there.
And we've talked about this. There's a lot of markets out there. The small to medium-sized market is pretty much ignored by most of the organizations that we deal with. They just don't even look at products in that space. Right. So I think it's a great way for them to actually get into as many different places as possible and kind of build up their capabilities. But yeah, you're right. I don't see very many like really large organizations that are like, yeah, we're using AlienVault. We don't see that. Right. And this might be a perfect place for them to actually fit in and bolster other cloud service providers, managed security service providers, solutions as a whole.
Tiff, do you see AlienVault in the enterprise?
Yeah, actually. So we spend a lot of time in SIEM, and SIEM is the heart and soul of our security operations, is having an analytics platform. AlienVault doesn't come up so much in the companies that we deal with, talking about $1 billion in revenue, 10,000 employees or higher. We see them more as a custom solution. So if you have a development team that can really support the development of the platform, those type of situations come up. So to the earlier point that going after this mid-market segment where there are some customization required and less price sensitivity, more price sensitivity actually, maybe that will be a better play for AlienVault. But actually, we don't really see that much just because of, I think it's the footprint of customers that we deal with regularly.
Excellent. This next article, uncovering encrypted threats. So the statement is, given organizations' growing trend towards HTTPS and its use by hackers to steal information, it makes sense to have a security solution in place that can decrypt and scan SSL TLS encrypted traffic for threats. I mean, is that really... I wonder about this requirement quite a bit, actually. Like, what's the real value of decrypting it? If I'm an attacker and I want to send traffic even over SSL, I might encrypt it with my own keys and my own methods as it goes over SSL, and then decrypting your SSL is really kind of useless if you're looking to detect data or even a threat. Or maybe if you're detecting encryption within encryption, then that itself is an anomaly. Which I don't get the effort put into decrypting traffic for inspection. Is it worth the effort?
Well,
what do you guys think?
And what we've seen, Paul, and it's funny that they mentioned Google. The vast majority of security products out there today, they may do SSL decryption, but they completely ignore everything that's going to Google or everything that's going to Gmail, just because that gives them performance boost. They can run faster. Right. That and they'd be tripping on false positives constantly. Anytime anyone in your organization was troubleshooting a command parameter for a tool or output from something. So. And this also, Paul, is why we went away from doing deep packet inspection and trying to look at payloads instead of looking at behaviors of what was actually happening on the network as well. So I don't know. I think it's important. I think you need to be doing that, especially from like a standard user screwing up from a DLP perspective. But we're not seeing it detect a lot of malware leaving networks these days. Because like you said, they can use HTTPS. Then inside that, they can do base 64 encoding, and most of the time you're going to blow right on through whatever products are there.
I agree.
Yeah, so, well, one thing to point out for that is layers, right? So security is all about layers and all the different controls that you can put in play. So packet inspection at the edge is a requirement for a lot of organizations, especially financial services organizations. So having the flexibility and coverage across multiple types of vendor platforms and different types of encryption protocols just gives another layer, right? Truly, it may be a false positive, but just the initial layer, the low-hanging fruit that you can get from packet inspection at the edge can add value for customers.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Tiff. In the financial space, I think if you're looking for sensitive data being exfiltrated, this is probably something that you're looking at, right? Because it's so critical to your business and easily identifiable. We're talking about fraud and things of that nature, and why it's kind of easy to detect fraud, because usually the intent of someone to commit fraud is financial, and it's very finite. However, when we look at why someone would deploy malware or ransomware, the motives and intentions are all over the map, in fact, which is why I think it's hard to detect a threat in the traditional security aspect. Easier for places like financial markets to look for it in terms of fraud and data leakage. So, although DLP is really hard, as we've noticed.
Yeah, we've known this for a while.
Yeah. Bitdefender reveals some hypervisor introspection. Says it's adding a new layer, security layer to the data center, providing an agentless solution for memory introspection around Citrix Zen server. It can identify and isolate attacks at the hypervisor level. I think it's interesting. Of course, the devil's going to be in the details. I would hope, though, that the big players, cloud providers, infrastructure as a service providers, have some kind of custom solution for this. Would you guys agree?
Yeah,
I think that this is. Oh, go ahead.
No, please.
I was going to say the idea of this of hooking into the hypervisor. I think we've talked about it a number of times. What is it you're actually doing in the hypervisor? Are you hooking into the hypervisor to look for attacks against the hypervisor, virtual machine escape attacks, those types of things, or are you hooking into the hypervisor to give you visibility into the different virtual machines that are actually running in such a way that a lot of malware won't be able to detect that they're actually being analyzed? So it gives you the ability to do analysis across multiple different virtual machine environments without necessarily having an agent on every single one, but instead being able to insert that at the hypervisor level and then watch it across the board. I think that second approach is really, really cool. The first one is just kind of FUD, not necessarily FUD. I mean, the idea of an attack against a hypervisor is a very real thing. It has happened, but it's been fairly rare, and the exploits that come out are usually fairly far behind the idea of the actual vulnerability being discovered. But that idea of being able to hook into a hypervisor, see all of the process calls for all of your different virtual machines that are running at the exact same time, I think that that's really, really, really cool. And I think that what they're saying is this is the beginning. I think they mentioned green fields like 3-4 times. And many times we're like, we don't even know what the hell that means. But at least from that perspective, they're saying this is basically something new. We're basically looking into a place that there aren't a lot of people looking into. So at least they're honest about that, right? It's basically creating the API hook so they can start doing that type of integration. I think it's a step in the right direction. I think it's actually going to be cool technology too.
Nice.
Right, and I would add on that from a buyer standpoint, really that needs to become as part of the very fabric of the cloud security provider's platform. So as an end user, you want to have those security controls baked into your VM plumbing. And so these security attacks that are going to come up and the findings from all these multiple processes that they're looking at the same time, it needs to be transparent to the consumer of the IaaS or the PaaS or the SaaS, the different types of cloud invocation models. So that's going to be interesting to see how that shapes the overall landscape for the cloud service providers.
Yeah, I think it's that continuing trend that the cloud is becoming a more secure place every day, not just from an infrastructure perspective, but from all of these tools that are being added on. They give you these extra visibility, which I think is great. And I think we're slowly seeing the trend move towards, it's probably going to be more secure in the cloud than I can secure it in my own data center. And of course, there are exceptions to that. NopSec unveils the world's first automated security controls measurement and risk remediation solution. This one's just for you, John. You ready for this? Today
So,
they released the E3 engine, the only validated security analysis technology that enables governments, enterprises, and mid-sized organizations, they're going after everyone, to evaluate its unique threat data, actively explore and assess the effectiveness of its mitigating controls, and enrich its remediation prioritization information. I couldn't find much more than what I just read about this particular. They make some bold claims in here.
And
very bold
if there's
claims.
one thing that they want you to know, it does also run on an iPad. So
all the marketing words.
A lot of marketing words. That's our marketing winner for this week. So
we're going to go through this. And first, you named your company NOPSEC, which means like NOP is no function security.
They should have named it NOP Sled Security.
Yeah, NOP Sleds. That would at least sound fun,
right?
You know, okay. So if we're going through this, like I spent some time on their website trying to figure out what they're actually saying, and it automatically goes through and quote unquote removes all the noise and basically trying to deduplicate vulnerability data by doing automated. It says simulates real exploits for actual proof of vulnerability. What the hell does that mean? So if we're going through it, we've got, I think they even had machine learning. They do. They have threat intelligence feed. They mentioned social media. They mentioned dark web. Great. They mentioned validated security analytics, precision risk scoring, and they've got machine learning in there. It's like basically they threw a whole bunch of marketing crap onto a web page and they hope that people buy it. It looks pretty though. I do have to admit that looks neat.
It does look pretty.
It does look very nice, but no, this is just as near as I can tell. This is whenever a company has gone too far into the marketing hype to actually provide any useful value for anyone that is interested in buying their product. There's just nothing here to actually sink your teeth into and say, yes, this sounds interesting to me.
Well, and I think they're trying to hit on multiple. They're trying to hit on too many problems, and they're trying to hit on too many target audiences in their messaging, which is, I think, the overarching problem for them. Although this problem, remediation prioritization, I'd also put that as like threat prioritization. Those are two areas that, despite all of the tools that we have available to us today, I think a lot of organizations still struggle with greatly. How do I take all of that data coming from my vulnerability management, apply it to patch management, and prioritize all of that? And that's the problem with that is with respects to vendor solutions, it's a lot of work, right? To build the model to be able to put a severity level on an incident, on an indicator of compromise, on a vulnerability. There's a lot of work. People have to be very heavily involved. Sure, you have tools that help you do that, but still there's a lot of work that has to go in there.
And this is a consistent theme across a lot of the vendors that we have here. I think that you have another one coming up here in a little bit. I can't remember. They mentioned single pane of glass, VRM, whoever. But they're oversimplifying the problem. And that the issue with that is, we were just talking about SIM alerts. There's a lot of SIM alerts, and there's reasons for that because networks tend to be very complicated. Very difficult things to get your arms around. But by constantly trying to sell these oversimplified solutions, I think that they're doing their customers and they're doing the industry as a whole a tremendous disservice all the way up and down the line. Because like you said, Paul, it is hard. It requires people who know what they're doing to react to these things.
Atif, how are your customers, especially you work with larger customers, dealing with this in any one of those areas in terms of dealing with the overwhelming alerts and being able to prioritize things for their SOC?
Complexity is the enemy of execution. Mm-hmm. And really, it's overwhelming. Our customers are overwhelmed with the number of solutions and the number of vendors, right? So vendor consolidation is happening left and right. The earlier point on the number of alerts that are firing, there's alert fatigue, right? As a market, there's just a lot of there's just too complex right now. And the report that you just went through, it's a testament of that, and I couldn't agree with you guys more with your observations of that.
Well, and this, I think this is transitioning nicely into the swim lane article. What was it, Paul? It said like 80 or 7. Hold on, I got it right here. 70% of alerts are ignored due to lack of skilled staffing resources.
Yes.
I mean, this goes back to the conversation we had last week, where you have a lot of SIM vendors that are saying log absolutely everything. People are. and it's alerting on absolutely everything, and they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
They don't understand what these things actually mean. And there's like 95% of the logs that are captured. I don't care if they're compressed or not. They're being captured and they will never, ever be looked at. It's one of those things where we got to start developing and working with SIM solutions that are logging the right things, that are actually going to be correlated to actual attacks that are going to happen on their network. And then, of course, having people that can actually swim through that data effectively. This is ridiculous. Even with Carbon Black, a lot of our Carbon Black customers, Carbon Black is awesome. I love the product. I think it's a great utility. It's a great tool. But it gets into this alert fatigue where they have hundreds, if not thousands of alerts that are popping up every single day, and trying to go through all of them is almost impossible.
Yeah, so I have a strong point of view on this because I talk with customers and manage our clients regularly. And so I'll start by saying that, before, to your point, it was that 2-3 years ago, it was about get your logs in one place. Get all your logs in one place. And then what am I going to do with those logs? Well, we'll figure it out once we get them all in one place. So then once we got them in one place, it's like, okay, now let's just fire them on. I want them all. Let's boil the ocean. And then all this alert fatigue came out. Now, fast forward to today, what we do, and others that are leading providers, managed service providers are doing, is it's not about the alert. It's about the scenario-based notable event. That's what we call it, scenario-based notable event. So what is the threat scenario that you're looking at? For example, if you're getting a bunch of IPS alerts and you're getting some endpoint logs coming in, is there a distinct IP address that you can automatically correlate using the analytics platform and come up with a scenario-based rule? And then that rule is tied to operational. We didn't even get into that yet. That, okay, you fire the alert, so what? What do you do then, right? Who's the resolver group, and how do you actually get it looked at? So if you can tie it back to threat scenarios and then tie resolver groups to that, and focus on a dozen, 2 dozen, depending on the size of the organization, types of scenarios, you're actually making progress with your security program versus looking at everything and not really looking at anything.
Well, and I think that's where Swimlane and other vendors in this space they're preying upon that problem of what happens after, like you said, Atif, what happens after you identify an event or can potentially identify an event. What do you do? And Swimlane and others like it in the security, automation, and orchestration game that I think is gaining a lot of momentum. I think it's going to be the next. I'll make a prediction, say it'll be like the next hot topic at RSA next year, right? I think this is where it's going because, as Atif just laid out, right? We collected all the alerts. Now we're trying to analyze all of the alerts, and then now you have to do stuff with all of those alerts, and that's where the SAO, security, automation, and orchestration products come in, and that's what Swimlane is preying on. They're saying, well, you can create automated workflows from this. Now, the differences in the vendors are staggering. Some work really well in incident response. Some are a little more encompassing. Some are easier to build in. I know like ServiceNow has a module for it as well. And there's a lot of people evaluating this space. I still think there's a lot of hesitation because a lot of us in IT today, and especially those of us that have been in IT for a while, have been burned by automation. And automation, I think, requires a level of trust from the user that isn't always there, especially in security, because we're all so skeptical.
Well, and the other thing, we talk about the security automation and orchestration. This is, I do agree with you, Paul, 110%. This is what we're going to be talking about at RSA. And I'm also 100% convinced that a year after that, we're all going to sit around and be like, oh, God, that was bad.
Yeah.
Woo! All right. So let's back up for a second because, look, right now, whenever it comes to vulnerability scanning, still to this day, organizations that do vulnerability scanning, if they bring down a critical system, then we still have customers that say, you're done vulnerability scanning. You're done. Now, imagine if that's applied to the security automation and orchestration for incident response. It just takes this tool screwing up once in an organization, and they're going to shut the damn thing off. And that's my big concern I have with these types of tools. And I think we've discussed this in the past. And it goes back to, once again, is we're trying to oversimplify it. We can put in a tool in your environment that's going to automate all of your incident response. You can fire your security team. You don't like them anyway because they're constantly telling you no and stop. So this is great. It's a great sellable point. But realistically, I think, just like you said, it's going to be a huge deal at RSA. A year later, we're going to be on to the next big buzz trend. And this didn't work because I just don't think that we're quite ready for that yet. I think we need to filter the data, get good data to people for doing good analytics, and focus on people making decisions with the best possible data sets we can give them.
Yeah, security orchestration is a little bit ahead of the time. It's kind of like looking at a Palm Pilot versus an iPhone. Palm Pilot, great product, great concept, great use case, wrong time, right? And I think security orchestration, same thing, a great promise here, and really would fix a lot of problems. But we just, as a security community, we have a very short amount of at-bats to get in front of the business and try to protect it. You get one wrong, one strikeout, you're out, right? You're not going to be able to block traffic anymore. Like, things that aren't wrong are always blamed on the firewall, right? And even the firewall may not even have anything to do with it. So, really good points there. And I think that orchestration is a great promise, but to actually get it into tactical operations is very challenging.
Now, I'm going to respectfully disagree because I've spent some time talking to vendors in this space, and there are some that I really do like. In fact, one of them I hope to get on the show. And I think that the ones that are going to emerge in this space and be very successful and actually help people are going to do that by allowing you to easily tie together people, process, and technology. And don't get me wrong, some of the vendors I've seen in this space are just like, oh, yeah, you can just like automate all this stuff. But some of the vendors are like, no, you can build a process and build integrations between your tools and people's and build a process, and then at any point stop and let a human do some evaluation and then have them continue the process on.
But there's the key, Paul. I mean, that's the thing that you and I have been talking about for well over a year now. It's the artificial intelligence, machine learning needs to get better information to a human being who actually makes the decision.
Correct.
And that's those, like you said, the products that are going to be successful are going to be the ones that are going to enable your security analyst to make better decisions with better data sets. It's not going to be having it do it on its own. I mean, we just keep beating this drum. And, eventually I think that the industry is going to get there. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And what was the analogy you used a year ago with it? Was it Go, or I can't remember what the game was.
Security is like a game of chess. You must think first before you move. No, that's a kung fu movie and a Wu-Tang Clan song. But it was the chess player, right? That Garry Kasparov that played chess against a computer and lost, and then subsequently a team of not the greatest chess players in the world, but really good chess players, had great process and great technology and were able to beat computers in chess. And it was the analogy drawn to security that we've been largely using an example for almost a year now here on the show that I think is a really good example for people. I use that analogy a lot to describe a lot of things in security. With that, I want to take a short break, come back, and I think we're going to dig into a lot of SIM and more on this topic and dig into some more details with a TIFF when we come back.